Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another video with the Out Law Firm. This is Daria Kucheraba here. I'm an associate attorney. Today, I want to talk to you about driving under the influence and the precautions and cautions that I want to give to you today. First of all, before we start, I think it's really important, and it goes without saying, that you should not be under any circumstances driving under the influence, because you may be a danger to yourself and the rest of people on the road, and we wouldn't want you to get into an accident or get somebody else killed, potentially. But now, without further ado, if you do not get a cab that night, or a Uber, or have a designated driver, there's a couple things that you should know. So if you are driving under the influence, generally in Missouri, the back limit is 008.08. And that's if you're 21 plus. If you're under 21, that is a stricter limit. That would be 0.02%. When there's a police officer on the road and you might fall victim to a traffic stop, you need to understand that police officers can have reasonable suspicion really over anything. You could have your hands on the wheel in a weird position, and the police officer would say, this is a little suspicious, let me stop them. Potentially, if you're under the influence, you might exhibit behaviors such as erratic driving, speeding, maybe blowing off through red lights, not stopping at the stop sign. Something of this nature would cause the police officer to pull you over. Now, if you are driving under the influence again, and the police officer approaches your window and you do, the whole cycle of license, registration, insurance, anything like that, you generally have the right to remain silent. You can say to the officer that you're remaining silent or keep the talk minimal. But just know, if you are also exhibiting behaviors of being under the influence, kind of swaying in your seat, maybe your eyes are glossed over, there's a breath of alcohol, and you're slurring your speech, that will further the suspicion of the officer, who already may have pulled you over thinking that you're drunk. So the police officer will ask you to take a breathalyzer test. Naturally, you have the right to refuse a breathalyzer test. However, know that it is basically an immediate suspension of your license for a whole year. So you kind of have to weigh your options there. If you do submit to a breathalyzer test and it does come up to be over the back limit, you will be subjected to an arrest under the charges of DWI. You would be brought into a station, and they might further ask you to give a blood test. Blood test is usually a little bit more accurate than breathalyzer tests. If not, you can request for a blood test to be taken as well. So now, what happens if you are charged with DWI? Well, you are pretty lucky if you are a first-time offender. First-time offenders kind of get, I wouldn't say a slap on the wrist, but it's milder than offenses if you're a repeat offender. So if you're a first-time offender, you go under for 90-day suspension of your license, maybe some penalties like fees, and also up to 6 months in jail. If you're a repeat offender, you can go up in charges pretty quickly if you just keep driving under the influence and getting caught and penalized. So penalties are 10 years in jail, maybe $10,000 in fines, but you're looking at having a felony on your record, which is really dangerous, and it encompasses a lot of harm to you personally going forward. Things to consider if you do get a charge on your record, just for future reference, not only that you would pay a lot of money and maybe go to jail, but that stays on your record for about 10 years. After 10 years, you can try to expunge it, which you might be successful in, but just think about the 10 years of having a DWI on your record. That could affect your employability, maybe your social connections, anything. I mean, employability is huge, and every employer does a background check on you now. Now, not every employer is going to make a big deal out of it. However, it is pretty important to have a clean record. So if you do not get hired for jobs that you perhaps wanted or are essential to your livelihood, DWI charge might be the reason why. So what do you do if you get arrested and charged? Well, you contact an attorney. An attorney will sit down with the prosecutor, and what we will do is that we will also inform you of your rights, maybe some defenses that you might have, because everything at the end of the day is circumstantial. There's really kind of two things that you should consider. If you're driving under the influence and you get charged and it's your first offense, and really the craziest thing you've done is really just driving under the influence and going maybe 10 over and maybe driving a little bit erratically, but nobody got hurt, there was no property damage, you didn't violate life-threatening laws and situations, then those circumstances are going to help you out in potentially minimizing or even maybe dismissing this charge. On the other hand, and this is also a big warning, once again, is that if you do drive under the influence and you get into a car crash, you kill somebody, and I knocked on wood for that, there'll be repercussions that are much more severe. And I think that really concludes the overall outline of DWIs. If you have further questions, don't be afraid to leave a comment or send a follow-up email. If you are in this situation, you're more than free to contact us at the law firm. And I thank you again for joining us for another video, and I hope you drive safely and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.